This is Teresa Sheets. I'm with the Steel Thread Project. We're at Clarksville, Tennessee, at the reunion of the Hamburger Hill reunion of the 20th anniversary of Operation Anaconda. And I'm here with Leonard Robinson today. Leonard, would you introduce yourself?
Leonard Robinson was born and raised in Guthrie, Oklahoma. In 1967, received a letter from Oklahoma State University asking me not to return. And so I took that as a good excuse to join the Army. And so I saw my local recruiter and told him I wanted to go airborne infantry because my cousin had told me that's what I needed to do. And he was home on leave from Fort Campbell when he told me that. And so he was in Alpha Company of 3187. And so I joined for airborne infantry. The recruiter kind of sat back in his chair and dropped his pen. They said, "That's pretty rough, you know." And I said, "Oh, yeah. My little skinny cousin can do it. I can do it." And so I wanted to find out what war was like. And the Army fulfilled all of my desires.
What was your cousin's name?
Gene Riley.
Okay.
He was in Alpha Company. He passed away in 2018.
Okay.
And so I left for basic training in July 24th of 1967 and went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And after that, got to go to Fort Gordon, Georgia for infantry AIT with a focus on airborne. If you were going to jump school, this was a special AIT. So you got to do extra push-ups and extra everything. So it was good. And then while I was there, they started trying to recruit people to go to the Non-Commissioned Officers Candidate School, or instant NCO, as some of us said at the time. And so the first sergeant said, "I'm going to line everybody up, and you come by, and if you have a good excuse for not going, let me know that. If you don't have a good excuse, you're going." And so I didn't have a good excuse. And so after airborne training, I went to the NCO school, and in April became an E5. And so I was fortunate enough to retain that rank all the way through the rest of my...
So you're one of the rare ones that was actually airborne qualified that came in 69.
In 68.
That's right. That's
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I came in country in July of 68 and went to the 90th Replacement Station and was assigned to Bravo Company, 3rd 187th.
How many days were you at the replacement center?
I don't remember. It was seemed like probably 4 days. Maybe it was... not long. It seemed long because I got to be on courtesy patrol the first day. We got in at midnight to Benoit when I came in country, and it was really, really hot at midnight, you know. And but the first day I got assigned to with a warrant officer, and we walked around all day long telling people to button their buttons and get their hands out of their pockets. And so got off duty about 10 o'clock that night and went to bed. And next morning, guys were talking about, you know, scrambling out of the barracks. And what are you talking about? And I said, well, they had that short round hit outside the barracks and everybody went to the bunker, you know. So, not everybody.
Slept through it?
I slept through it.
Wow. Must have been tired.
Yeah, and then I got my orders, and I was, wow, this is great. I'm going to be 3rd 187th where my cousin is. So they were back at the company area when I got to 187, and the second morning I was there, I was walking down the company street, or battalion street, because all the companies were lined up along it. And it just kind of clicked in my brain that this is like all I've ever known. This is where I am supposed to be,
Really?
and everything. So it was a different experience than I've recall having any other time.
Oh, interesting.
So, of course, we had their mess hall, and we had somebody put up a poster, was a travel poster, and I can't remember which airlines it was, United or somebody like that, and it said, "Next vacation, visit fascinating Southeast Asia." And so I think everybody had a laugh at that.
Sunny Vietnam.
Yes.
So,
sunny or rainy.
Yeah, and hot. Well, that was at Cu Chi when you were
No, this was at Phuc Vien.
Okay.
At
So
the,
you right first. Okay.
Yeah, went there. The company was in the field, and so I was at Phuc Vien for 4 or 5 days, I believe, until I went to Cu Chi to join the company in the field. Yeah.
Okay, so you were kind of back in the 3rd Brigade, 3187th Rear first, and then shipped out to where they were. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What was your feelings? Did you know you were going to be assigned to the 3187th, the same as your cousin? I mean, I didn't
no idea, because I just was sent to 90th replacement when I got my orders after NCO school. That was that's the first time I enlisted so that I could find out what war was like, but through all that training, so it was almost a year later, you got the orders that said went OJT to Fort Lewis, Washington, and then would be going to the 90th Replacement Company, Republic of Vietnam. Yeah. And that made it real. It was real then that I am going. Yes, it is. And the Army was very good. They gave me everything that
you hope for. What are you? Who was your first platoon leader and platoon sergeant?
Lieutenant Sam Bungie, and was the platoon leader. Very, very good guy. I believe he graduated from. He went through ROTC, I think, to get his commission, and the platoon sergeant was Sergeant William Prather, and I was assigned to 3rd Platoon, and when I came in, they made 3 Sergeant Robinsons in 3rd Platoon. So Charlie Robinson was a squad leader, and I believe that, James Robinson was, I believe he was 2nd squad leader, and then I was assigned to the 4th squad, and he was a Hawaiian sergeant, was Kachocho or
yeah, I know who you're talking about. Kachocho, yes.
And he was I was in his squad, and so I progressed from there.
So you were actually with several of those guys deployed in '67, so they were pretty well experienced.
Yes, they were, and so that was very, very helpful for me to have them. And there were a couple of guys in the company that knew my cousin and stuff. So 2 or 3 of them had been wounded and had jobs back in the rear at the company, but they were still friends with Gene, and so they were able to, we were able to make contact when I first got to the company before I went to the field, and then after I was wounded shortly after Alpha Company was overrun, so it took me a couple of days to find out that my cousin was okay. But when I was in the hospital, they were on a stand down and re-equipping and getting new people in and training, and so he got to come over to the hospital and visit me and give me a hard time for getting wounded.
So, do you recall hearing about when Alpha Company got overrun? Do you recall getting the news of that?
Yes, I was. I never really knew firebase names right at first, but we were on a new firebase. So was it Stryker? There was Shafter. We were on Shafter when I heard that they'd been overrun, and so I started trying to find out, if anybody knew if my cousin had been one of the casualties or not. And I think it was a couple of days later they said that he was okay and he hadn't been didn't have any wounds or anything. He was one of the few that didn't have something happened and stuff. And so then it was only because I was on the 6th, so it was probably 8th or 9th when I heard it. He was okay, and then it was a couple of days later when we went out and I was wounded.
What was your first? Do you recall your first combat operation, or do you recall the first time actually out in the field doing patrol?
Yeah, it was. It was. I think it was early in August when I got to the field, and I met the people, and we were walking around through rice paddies and stuff. And I think I've been there about 3 days when we came under fire the first time, and we were out in the middle of the rice paddy, and there's a tree line in front, and then it was pretty well open to the right, and I was more to the right side of the formation, and we started taking fire, and I got down on my hands and knees on the dike and was kind of crawling along looking to see if I could see where the fire was coming from, and started put my hand down, and tracer hit about on the dike where I was going to put my hand, or it looked like it anyway. And I said, maybe I need to get off the top of this dike and get on the side of it. And so I got down. I was carrying a M79 at the time, so I shot a few rounds out, but never really saw anyone. And we were awake most of the night. We had flare ship come around and drop flares, and kept the area lit up till I don't know, sometime after midnight. And then we slept. Next day went out, and some of the lead elements, I guess, killed the Vietnamese, but on a trail. And it seems like we went back to the rear, back to the base camp there at Phuc Bien for 4 or 5 days, and then we went back to the field, and that was when we helped build the Shafter and stuff. So.
And then the time you were wounded, I believe that was September
12th of 68, and we were on a platoon size mission outside it may have been company. I think it was platoon. Anyway, no, it was company size. We were out, it'd been out a night or so, and got a call that there was some people had been taking fire and we needed to go reinforce them, so the company flew out. I knew it was toward Tay Ninh, no idea where it was, but we got on the ground and there wasn't anything happening, and so we decided to start moving forward, and came under pretty heavy fire at that time. And a couple of guys from I can't remember if they were what platoon they were with, but they were KIA, and so Sergeant Prather came and got my squad, said, let's go out here, try to flank where the fire was coming from. And we got on a trail, and it was Sergeant Prather, and there was a Sergeant Sullivan, I believe was his name, and then I think it was Spec 4 Hannawalt. I can't remember for sure, but we were moving down the trail and firing off to the left to the open area, and fire came down the trail, and I heard someone say, "I'm hit," and someone else said, "I'm hit too." And it was the two people between Sergeant Prather and I, and they moved off the trail. And I thought when I heard one of them say, "I'm hit," I thought it was Sergeant Prather, but he was laying on the trail in front of me again. Everybody was down. I thought, oh man, they know right where we are. If I make a move, I'm next, type thing. And finally, the Sergeant Prather's RTO came in and said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just move everybody off. I'll go check on Sergeant Prather." And so I crawled up to him, and I grabbed his wrist, and there was no pulse, and I turned him over, and he had taken a round right in the forehead. And so I grabbed him and started pulling him back and pulled him off over to where the company CP was. And I was talking with Captain Frederick, and he said, "Is anybody else out on the trail?" I said, "No, everybody's off." And he said, "Well, move him back, and you move back, and so or you get him out of here." And as I'd never heard an explosion, but shrapnel hit me in the leg and flipped me over in the air, and I thought I'm hit, and I may have said it out loud because the first thing I remember hearing after I looked down at my leg and I didn't see any blood or anything, I said, "Well, it felt like a cramp." And I heard Captain Frederick saying, "Move on back, you're not hit that badly." And so I said, "Yeah, it's just a cramp, But then when I got up and started helping Sergeant Q move Sergeant Prather's body back, I could tell, well, there is something in there. So Sergeant Q cut my pant leg off and put a bandage on. There was just a small trickle of blood. But anyway, I went back to Coochie to the 12th Evac Hospital and spent 3 weeks back there, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. And,
so it was a little bit more severe than they initially thought?
It wasn't bad. It was because of, they got me in, they took out the shrapnel, but they said they had found that they really need to let it drain so it would heal properly. And so it would be 2 or 3 days before they would suture it. So 3 or 4 days later, they said, "Okay, we're going to suture you. Don't eat any breakfast in the morning. Don't eat anything after supper tonight." I said, "Okay." Next day, I was waiting around, and after lunch, I said, "Are they going to do anything or not?" They said, "Yeah, we've had so many casualties coming in, we just can't get to them." Okay. So next day, basically the same thing. I got to eat supper that day, but nothing the next day. Same situation. So I didn't get it sutured, and the next day they didn't even tell me anything. They just said, "Go ahead," So I ate and everything, and I think it was in the afternoon. They came in with a wheelchair and they said, "Hop in, we're going to go suture your legs." So took me over and put some lidocaine in it, and then put 3 steel stitches in it. So I got to rest for a while there.
How did you feel being at the hospital? I've heard some of the other guys talk about they were wounded, they're taken away from these men that they've been living around, and it was kind of a lonely experience, but I don't know if that is something you felt or...
I didn't really, because I guess because I'd been in country such a short time that I didn't didn't have bonds with anybody yet. And like I said, my cousin got to come over and visit me. So
You had ties outside.
yeah, the outside of the company that, the company clerk was one of my cousin's friends. So I told him when he came in, brought some mail in or something that, if you see Riley, let him know where I am. So he came to visit. But he started forming some bonds with the guys around that were in there. And then, I don't know, I'd been there a week or so, and Sergeant Q came in. He had been wounded, and at the same time, Captain Frederick was wounded, so he was in a different ward. But so there were ties to the company that I got to see part of the time I was there, and so it wasn't a total lone. There were lonely times to think about. I remember thinking about that, when you get down to it, war was really stupid because it didn't prove right or wrong. It just proved either more power or more determination, and that it was a stupid way to conduct things, but it was necessary to work, to have for some people that wanted to create war. So there was a time of reflection there, and
so that's a little different than when you were coming in. Did you notice that difference? I mean, had you transformed? Because when you were coming in, you were a little bit more like you wanted to experience it.
Well, I was experiencing, but
did your mindset change?
Well, yeah, I think you can't do it, and that was of course, it took me years to figure out, but the glory of war disappears when the first bullet goes past your head, and so the first time you're wounded, it takes away. You start realizing you're only human. You can. Life is very fragile, and you can. It can be gone very, very quickly, and so when I left the hospital and went back to the field, for the first, may have been a couple of weeks, it may have been a week, but I remember every time, my head itched. I just barely moved my helmet enough to where I could scratch my head. And then it finally dawned on me and said, they're out there all the time. They know exactly where I am. When they get ready to shoot, they're going to shoot, and it doesn't matter if my helmet's on or not.
Right.
And so I just started relaxing a little bit more, and react when the situation warranted. And
Now, when you returned to the field, were they still in 3 Corps?
yes, yeah, for just a very short time, because I think I got out of the hospital maybe the first week in October, and then by I can't remember if it was the end or middle of October was when we moved north to I Corps with the rest of the division.
What was the talk at that time about moving north? Do you recall any of the feel or the conversations?
Well, I remember when I first got there, the company had been up, I guess, in the Central Highlands, and the old guys were talking about. Said, "Man, it's bad up in there in Central Highlands. So up north is really bad. It's good here, because we got shot at every couple of days and kept you on your toes, but not too badly, and not too many casualties." But so I think there was a little bit of that talk when we were getting ready to move up, because they'd been there and had some pretty heavy fighting. So they were, telling everybody, newer guys, got to be cautious and you got to be alert and all this stuff. And but we were going back with the rest of the division, so we weren't working with that leg unit anymore. Of course, we had quite a few legs in
there were legs already.
in there. But so that was I guess there was part of the feeling of adventure of moving up there, and just not as many rice paddies, so your feet could dry out once in a while. And
a lot more hills, so.
Yes.
So do you recall the first fire base you guys were stationed at up there?
I can't remember. I know that within the first few weeks that we were there, we went to Firebase Birmingham, and I think Firebase Birch's Garden. And but we didn't spend a lot of time. It was just kind of getting our feet wet before we started walking around in the woods and stuff. And then it was didn't seem to be too much longer before we moved to Camp Evans. And as I recall, Bravo went directly to Firebase Miguel, which was kind of down on the side of a hill, was a Marine fire base. And so the plan seemed like almost immediately we were going to go up to the top of the hill and build a fire base, and that was Firebase Rakkasan. And so we went up there and started cutting trees and everything. We had Private Chrissy from West, so I think he was from Eastern Ohio. He was almost in Pennsylvania. And he had worked in logging some, but he was a little skinny guy, and they sent out these chainsaws for us to use. And the big guys were grabbing, and they were just going at it. They were really getting kicked because they were, and Chrissy said, "Let me show you how to use that." And he grabbed it and he was a pro, you could tell. And I learned a lot from him about how to do that. And we would go up, we'd spend the night down at Firebase Miguel, and then we'd walk up in the morning and cut some trees. And we had a new replacement come in, and Riley King, he was good guy. He was very, I think frightened is the right word. He was, first couple of nights, he didn't sleep. He stayed awake all night. And so he wasn't thinking clearly when we went up one day and I said, "Okay, everybody stack your rifles over here so they'll be safe." And he didn't put his over there. He kept it close to him. He laid it down on a log, and a tree fell beside that log, and it bent the barrel of his rifle. And he came like, "What do I do now?" And said, "Well, we'll send it back in, let him put a new barrel on it." And he said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "I guess relax, And so it was 3 or 4 days later, and he did relax and everything, and they finally did get his rifle back with a straight barrel.
Poor guy.
It forced you to relax because there wasn't anything he could do about it and stuff. So that was there's always something humorous that can come out of whatever you're doing, and that was one thing my Dad told me before I joined was that, before I went to basic, that he said there's going to be enough bad things that happen every day that think about something funny that happened that day and dwell on that when you go to sleep. So that'll help you through. And it was very good advice for me anyway.
Yeah. So, what, about a month building Rakkasan? Several weeks?
Several weeks, as far as, before it got to, because we moved off and somebody else came in and did more work on it, and we kind of traded off to get. So we switched off working on it, and because we came back one time and there was the battalion CP was up there. They had big bunker built and everything that was nothing we'd ever seen like that. And then another time we came on, we had the Tory up. The
big old Tory.
Yeah. So it it evolved and over time, and we spent time on Rakkasan and Firebase Helen, and Firebase Helen was my favorite one because it was so steep all the way around it that you had the advantage if anybody tried to attack. True. And and you had good views.
I bet it was beautiful.
It was. I've always said that Vietnam was, especially up in the mountains, was really beautiful country. And looking on Google Maps now, you see they've created reservoirs and everything. So it looks like a paradise now.
So the first, do you recall the first operations out there humping those hills? Anything about the first few months of 69?
No, I went on R&R in January in the hopes that while I was on R&R, they would have another Tet offensive of some type, and I wouldn't be able to get back in country till it was over. But that didn't happen. It didn't pan out. But it was. We went a long time without any significant contact, without any even any rounds being fired at it. It seemed like, and which was a contrast with being down in the rice paddies. We were, like I said, shot at every 2 or 3 days. We would receive some kind of fire, and but there was nothing, and it was a time for them, I guess, to be rebuilding their infrastructure and getting supplies pulled together and stashed, because we did find a weapons cache that had medical supplies too, and I think that was in early March or mid-March. I don't recall for sure, but along about that time. And it was out closer to the Asha that we were operating then. And so, things were just monotonous. That was a word one of my friends from high school had used to me, was that he said it was, days of monotony with moments of terror interspersed, and it kind of got to be like it was very, you got lax when you weren't being shot at. You weren't quite as careful, and we, in a lot of ways, we were very fortunate, but we did have some fire, but not anything compared to what we had down south, and until we got to go out to didn't know what they were going to build a fire base, but it was years later that I understood that was Firebase Airborne, that we're going out to Dong Ngai, I guess is how it was pronounced. Never heard it while we were there, but that was first significant contact that I remember after we moved up north. And
what do you recall about that whole experience, if you want to share it?
It was. I think that I was I think I was a squad leader then, and I know we took off, and I can't remember if I was the second or third helicopter. I know that Terry Larson, one of the RTOs, I think he was the platoon sergeant's. He'd been my RTO when I was platoon sergeant, and then he was. We had a new platoon sergeant, and I can't remember now who it was, but I think it was an E6. And when we took off, when our chopper took off, we're flying over, and I was giving him a thumbs up, and he was giving me a thumbs down because he was hearing the radio that they were, already had a chopper shot down and everything. So I thought, oops. And so we flew out, and we got into queue. Our chopper did, and there, I don't really know how many were in front of us, but we were kind of coming along, and the pilot turned around. He said, "We're not going in there." Yeah, so there was a lower LZ we landed on, and so we got down there, and we were just maybe half of the third platoon landed there, and half of a portion of first platoon, and I assume second platoon was there, and so just part of third, and we got in defensive position and I can't remember how long. It was like a couple of days. We had received some fire and everything. We were going to move up to try to, help relieve the guys up above. And as we started moving out, we came under fire. And I know I was stopped and kind of looking around, and I was probably a little bit slow to do my duty. And I think it was Sergeant Wright was the platoon sergeant, first platoon. He was saying, "Move out, get your men moving up there." And so it kind of clicked with me and said, "Okay, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing." And so we started, moving forward and everything. And I got some shrapnel in the arm, and I looked at it when it hit and saw that it wasn't a terrible wound, but the medic came up, and by the time he got there, my arm was just coated with blood. It looked like it was about torn off, and he was very nervous, very shaky. The medic was, because this was the first time I believe he was under fire, and so he filled out a casualty tag and said, put a bandage on it and said, "You need to move back." So I went back down, and the company commander was Captain Robinson was there by the trail. He said, "I guess this is going to mess up your in-country R&R," because I was supposed to leave the next day. And I kind of smiled and said, "Yes, sir," because I knew where I was. I was going to the hospital. So, and so that was the last time I saw him. Last time I saw Terry Larson was there with his radio, and by the time I got back from the hospital, they were on their second. Captain Litton had been there and was wounded, and then Captain Chappelle was the company commander when I got back to the company, and so it was. I left there and went to the rear, went to the MASH unit at Camp Evans, and they removed the shrapnel, and they started getting enough casualties. I guess they moved me down to 95th Evac at Da Nang, and when I was there was a staff sergeant that had been with the 187 in Korea, and we talked about the 187. So when the doctor finally came through and said, well, guess we're about ready to send you back. What's your job? And I said, I'm squad leader. And he said, you think they'll send you right back to the field? And I said, I would imagine they would. They always needed squad leaders. And the sergeant next, he said, you need to take it easy on him, sir. He's getting short. He said, really? How short are you? And I said, about 45 days. And he said, well, I guess we can send you down to the 6th Convalescent Center, Cameron Bay, for a couple of weeks. And so while I was there was when the first casualties from the company came down. Got there, Troxel was machine gunner, and he came in. He was telling me about the guys that had gotten killed and everything. So that was my first knowledge of Hamburger Hill, before it was Hamburger Hill.
Right. So there was you weren't getting any news from the battalion? Okay. No news to the guys in the hospital, where, because being in Da Nang, you were further away. When first time I was wounded, I was in Cu Chi, right? So the battalion was nearby, yeah, and stuff. So that was my first contact with, or my first hearing of how bad the battle was. And so when I got back to the battalion, I did some duties around there, building sandbags around the blackjack and the sergeant major's latrine, because they'd had a round hit nearby and they didn't have any protection around it. So on Rakkasan or
at Camp Evans, okay. Yeah, and so then I went out to return to the platoon, and Lieutenant Charles was the new platoon leader. He'd been in Charlie Company, and what I understood was they kind of combined Charlie Company and Bravo Company to make a company. Yeah, and I came out and said, I wanted to report back for duty, and he said, I don't want you in 3rd Platoon. And so, what? And he said, I got my leadership set up. That's the way I want it. I don't want to put you in to be a squad leader and knock somebody else out. I said, well, I've been in 3rd Platoon ever since I've been in country, and I don't have much time left, and I'd like to finish my time being in 3rd Platoon. And I will be a squad member. I don't have to be a leader, and but I would like to do that. And he said, well, let me think about that. And so he did. Finally, I got to be with 3rd Platoon and finished up my tour. When I got ready to return to the States, went back to Camp Evans, and the sergeant major said, what are you doing back here, Sergeant Robinson? I said, going home. He said, what? I said, yeah, my time is done. He said, I didn't know that. I thought you were somebody new coming in here to... No, I was just returning from the hospital and stuff. So,
do you remember the date you got back from the hospital?
I
was it June or
it was
May?
It was right around the end of May or 1st of June. It could have been in June. I don't recall now for sure. And I haven't looked at my letters to, when I wrote to my parents to look at the dates and, what I was saying, because I think I may have said, back with the unit or something, but my ETS was, my DROS was such that when I left Camp Evans and went down to Benoit, I was the 9th Infantry was being pulled out, so there were, extra seats on the planes that had been planned for other DROS guys. But since the 9th Infantry was pulled out as a division, that freed up seats. So I got out 2 days early, and that's what my DD-214 says. It was 11 months and 28 days. And I said, doggone, it felt like a year, but
Pretty close.
yeah.
So when you got back to your platoon after coming out of the hospital, or even your company,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm assuming there was a lot of new faces.
Yeah, it was all well, there were a few faces that were still there, but there were a lot of new faces, and definitely, well, Sergeant Garza was still there. I can't remember now if he was our platoon sergeant at that point, or if he was the first sergeant. He was above me for sure. And so we were out on a fire base after we left the beach. We went out on a fire base, and I remember we went out setting trip flares on a hill that was beside the fire base, and it was hot, and boy, it really, I was out of shape from for walking around on hills and stuff. That we came in, and he said, well, you're getting short, so this will be the last time you go out. You stay down here when we go out on those type of trips. So it was only a couple more days before I got called out off the fire base back to the process out.
How did that feel?
Very good. Very anxious time when I was getting ready to fly from way back down to I guess it was Long Bend, that there was some heavy rain and stuff, and they said, well, we've canceled flights and stuff. And about 9:30, they said, okay, we got a C-130 going down to Benoit. If you want to go, you can get on it, So, yeah, don't ask me twice. And so I flew down and processed around. It didn't take long because they had the extra seats for the Freedom Birds, and we flew from Benoit. I think it was like 1:15 or 1:30 on Sunday afternoon. We took off. We flew to Japan, and then we took off from Japan. We hit altitude, and I had a carton of milk, and there was a British flight attendant on there. She said, "Can we get you anything?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like, if you have a carton of milk, I'd like that." She said, "Excuse me?" I said, "A carton of milk." And she said, "Oh, milk. Yes." So I drank my carton of milk, and I went to sleep, and I woke up about 10 minutes before we came across the California coast. And so it was, really good feeling. Landed at Travis Air Force Base.
A good sleep.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Deep sleep, I guess. I don't remember moving. And so that was a good flight. One of the best flights of my life.
I bet. Going home.
Yeah.
Going home. And then how many days at Travis, or was it like an immediate turnout?
From Travis, you boarded buses and went to Oakland to the whatever they call the replacement station, or whatever it was, and I was there, and I think by midnight of that night, I was at San Francisco Airport. Got on a plane flying to Dallas, and spent a couple hours there, and then flew to Oklahoma City and picked up by my parents.
How was that? That was great to see.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. Yes, and it was good to see them. My reaction was probably not as much as they expected or wanted, or but I think since my dad too.
We'll get that.
Yeah. Since my dad was in World War II, he was pretty empathetic and not like some people had. Well, tell us about that he was pretty laid back about it, and but it was good. And got home, picked up my car that he had ordered for me, and got my insurance, and I was back in the world.
What did you do when you got back?
I had I had a 30-day leave, and then I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Went to the dark side, and with the 82nd, I was. I guess because I'd been wounded twice, they didn't put me in an infantry unit. They put me in the headquarters company and band of the support command of the 82nd. Yeah. So I was the training NCO, and for almost a year, from late August or mid-August until July of 70, when I got out.
What did you do when you got out?
I went back to school. I got in on probation because my grades were such that they told me not to come back to Oklahoma State. So I went to a smaller college for 2 years and did pre-engineering. I was going into architecture, so that was what I made up my mind for the first morning I woke up in the Army, was that when my 3 years are up, I'm going back to school. I'm going to become an architect. And so I went, that was my goal. And so I went there, and they had a pre-engineering curriculum that they did. So I had 13 hours of calculus, and I had 10 hours of physics with calculus and all this stuff. And when I transferred to University of Oklahoma School of Architecture, these guys were taking 3 hours of physics for poets, and maybe a college algebra course for their math, and so I really was very much more to the engineer side of things than I needed to be to graduate in architecture. But I did. I did. I got my master's in architecture and set off to find out what that was like, because I didn't. That was one of my dad's suggestions, that I, look into that and maybe do that, because I like to draw pictures. And what I found out was I really wasn't the artist, but I did enjoy what it took to put buildings together. And so I really came down to where I was more making sure that all of our buildings met the codes as far as life safety. That really became my what I really enjoyed most, was the life safety issues. That was the thing that really kept my interest up.
Stuff, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have any trouble, or what was your experience adjusting, like going from a war zone to?
Well, a few years after I gotten out, I finally realized that I think that my year at Fort Bragg helped, because I saw guys who came back and were immediately back into civilian life, and they seemed to have a lot more trouble than I did. I had problems, but I didn't have the severe problem, or didn't feel like they were severe, that they had, and I really attributed that to being still in, because other guys I saw who had made a career of it didn't seem to have any problems with that, because they were, like I was that first year, was, getting back into civilian life, but still in the military. So you had the constraints of the military, but you had the freedom to start, doing some other things. So I believe that was helpful. And my take on things was really changed, I guess, by reading Karl Marlante's book, What It Is Like to Go to War. And he said in ancient times, when the warriors went out to battle, they came back and they wouldn't let them back into the community until they had gone through cleansing processes, and that helped them mentally feel clean to go back into the community. And I started thinking, that was one of the things that I really had started feeling over the years, was that, that I acted certain ways because of feeling unclean to be around normal people, and because of things you had to do. Your job was to shoot people, and so that's so different than where you're raised and everything, that you don't do that. It's bad enough to hit somebody, but to shoot them, and so there's a deep sense of uncleanness when you come back, and that it seemed to just grow over the years, or I guess the realization grew that you felt that way, and it wasn't a real conscious thing, but it was more subconscious until you brought it up and you start saying, "Oh, that's kind of the way I felt," and so that was really changed my thoughts, and that's after I had started counseling at the vet center.
How long did it take you before you went to counseling?
Only about 38 years. So I was, yeah. Well, of course, I got out of the Army in 1970. So 2013, I was the state commander for the Military Order of the Purple Heart for the state of Alabama, and things were just started piling. It seemed like they were piling up, and the region commander said, "Hey, maybe you need to seek out some counseling." And one of my friends in Huntsville said, "I've been going to the vet counseling center here. You need to call this counselor and talk to her and get some help. I think you need some help." And so I did, and it really started helping me. And she was, I guess it was unofficial, I don't know. She helped get into the VA, to get C&P get my files started, I guess, really, because I had gone one time in the 90s to have a Agent Orange screening, and I found out later my sister was working at the VA, and she said, "Yeah, I got you set up for this Agent Orange screening." Well, it was supposed to be a C&P. I I didn't know any terminology. And so I went through and they were checking me and they said, yeah, you got what's problems, and stuff. And so I said, well, I got this place on my leg that, really came up during Vietnam and stuff. And I said, well, we'll get the guy to check it out. Well, I don't remember if he was first or second lieutenant, but he came in, he looked at it, and he said, that's just a such and such. You guys make me. And I thought, who are you? And of course, flight was the thing that I thought at the time.
Wow.
Years later, I thought what I should have said and everything, but I just wanted to get out, there, and saw my sister and one of her co-workers, and said, well, Finny, what'd they say? And I said, I need to leave, and stuff. So I didn't have anything. I'd heard other stories about VA, but that was my first experience. And after I left, she was saying, well, I thought they might. She was telling her coworkers, so I thought they might have done something for him. He was wounded twice. And the guy said, what? He was wounded twice? He should have been at least getting something for stuff, scars and stuff. I didn't know that at the time. But then when I went through the CMP in Birmingham, after the urging of the counselor, they gave me 30% for PTSD, I guess because I wasn't foaming at the mouth and I was I had a job and everything. But that was my.
Have you ever got
time.
additional disability?
I haven't yet. I don't know. My dad's older brother in World War II, he was when he had trouble for years with his he was wounded in the ankle and heel and stuff. He had trouble the rest of his life with it, but he deserved it. I was lightly wounded, just enough to get out of the field and get the Purple Heart. Well, and not as badly as many. Of course, I had reinforcement along those lines. Somebody I met in Huntsville, they said, "No, if you don't, if you didn't lose a limb or have severe wounds, you shouldn't get a Purple Heart." He was a helicopter pilot, was he? No.
Yeah. So when did you attend your first reunion?
2018 was the first time. I've been, invited over the years. I had thought about it, but since it was called the Hamburger Hill chapter, I thought, that's for the guys who are on Hamburger Hill, and I don't want to desecrate anything because I wasn't there. I was already in the hospital when they went there, and finally in 2018, I decided that I was going to come. And the first person I saw that I knew was when I was checking in, Jerry Dean came over to me, and he had one of the black scarves that we'd had in Vietnam, but he'd had some new ones made, and he said, "You were in Bravo Company, weren't you?" It was 3rd Platoon, right? And I said, yeah, Leonard Robinson. They never knew Leonard, but they, and I said, have you talked to Applin? And Chris Applin, and he said, he's right outside. You walked past him when you came in. And I walked out. So there's about 5 of us that have been making the reunions. One guy's off and on. He comes about every other year, and so it's really been amazing to see the guys you were actually in, and I was telling them, that I didn't feel worthy to come to the reunion at Hamburger Hill, and they said, yeah, but you trained us to, when we came in country, and so, in a way you were there. And I said, well, not much, not much of a way, but I'll take that. So it's been good to get back with them and reminisce about the good old days and stuff. But it's helpful to have the actual guys. The counseling. I've done group counseling at the vet center, and it's good. It's been very helpful. But there's just something about the guys that you served with to be back with them and stuff. So it's been good.
Anybody in particular you want to mention? Anything? There's always that for a lot of the guys. Talking to a lot of guys, there's always those one or two people that were impactful for them in Vietnam. Is there anybody you want to?
Well, I think that there were many, that had an impact, that especially, Captain Frederick was just a really solid captain, old guy, then I look at the pictures of him now, and he wasn't a whole lot older. I turned 21 while I was in Vietnam, so, he wasn't a whole lot older than me, and, we were all young once and stuff. And then Lieutenant Bungie was very, I really appreciated his approach to leadership in the platoon that he was, he'd say, I want to hear your opinions. He said, I will make the decision, but I want to hear your opinions, and, that may sway me, maybe it won't, but he was very. I appreciated that. I think my first platoon sergeant had some impact. It was he was helpful too, and although I wasn't around him too much, because it wasn't too long after I was in country that he was killed. There were a number of guys in the platoon and our squad. Terry Larson was, he was a good guy. He was just slightly younger than me. That he was KIA on Hamburger Hill, and he was when he first got in country, he broke his glasses, and it took a long time to get them. And he didn't have real good sight. He needed his glasses, and so he became my RTO, and when I was the platoon sergeant at the time, and so we got to talk a good bit. And I remember we were talked about, we weren't really afraid of dying, we just were concerned about how it would affect our parents. And unfortunately, his parents got to find that out, and mine didn't have to go through that. And there were, varying degrees of, the guys I see at the reunion now, I had formed, I really cared for them as my troops. I cared for them as friends too. And So it's been good to renew those friendships.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm actually gonna. Was there any closing thoughts or anything you want to, looking back at the last, 40, 50 minutes, or is there anything you left out that you want to mention or talk about?
I can't think of anything. I've probably said more in this interview than I have in previous interviews that I've given, and those were a little more directed at, my experience in Vietnam, but, I've talked about awards and decorations too. And so they were more specific toward that. But no, I don't, I was very, very fortunate to survive the year and be, like I said, lightly wounded, to get out of the field for a little while, and almost like 3 R&Rs.
Yeah, I guess,
Yeah.
Well, food and sleep and
a soft bed to lay in instead of on the ground.
Well, I appreciated talking to you that first time on the phone, because you're researching stuff and you hear, okay, something happened on September 12th, and my dad had gotten a Silver Star in that one, and so you're researching and you haven't talked to anybody that was there, and then finally I got to talk to somebody who was actually there, and I've since found, I think I sent that all to you, the information from I can't remember, it was a 25th Infantry Division report where there's like 2 paragraphs on that battle, so it was nice to be able to talk to you about that, and being there with Prater, because that's one of there's so many battles where a lot of the guys were there and they know all the information about it, but then you get these 2 guys that were killed and you're like, nobody can give you any information. So I appreciate that, talking to you about that. So, and have you ever gotten in touch with Sam?
I did not. I've can't locate his email address, and I do. I think I'm ready to contact him and everything. He was, like I said, he was. I think he set me on a good path. I don't know that I stayed with the path too well. But,
make sure you get that. Well, Leonard, thank you very much, and I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm going to end this interview.
Okay, thank you.